and thanks for tuning in to another awful movie review.
I want to go home.
Snakes and vampires aren't creatures that are commonly associated with one another in horror movies. But since there's a first time for everything, one of those rare films to make that combination is The Lair of the White Worm.
Oh well, better take a look, I suppose.
This supernatural horror comedy is based off a novel by the same name by Bram Stoker. The guy literally wrote Dracula, one of the most iconic horror villains in history. So how can this go wrong? First of all, let's put things in perspective. This is only very loosely adapted from the book, which would explain certain things. The great author must have been rolling in his grave seeing his source material being treated this way.
But he didn't like the look of it, so he threw it down a well.
But just before we get going, if there's a bad movie you would like me to review, leave me a comment down below. Don't forget to like this review, subscribe, let me know your thoughts and feelings on The Lair of the White Worm.
Well, I'll drink to that.
After reading the book, director Ken Russell had some interesting source material to work with. This was an opportunity to bring to the screen one of Stoker's lesser-known novels. Not just that, but Russell took his liberties and incorporated elements of English folklore with the story of the Lambton Worm into the screenplay, all while keeping the core concept of the book, revolving around a snake-worshipping cult.
This is crazy. Where did you get such an idea?
It potentially could have been a good monster movie, but it's not. In a small English town, an archeologist finds a strange, large skull. He discovers it to be the remains of a giant serpent god, which was once worshipped by pagans in ancient Rome. The people around the village start being tormented and killed by an ancient priestess, half human, half snake vampire, who lives next door. She also happens to worship this snake.
Oh, why didn't you say so before?
The way the director just squeezed in two stories together comes off as clunky and feels really out of place, unfortunately. It's like there are two tales into one movie which try to intertwine, but only to confuse the audience in the end. I didn't really get the whole picture, it just felt really perplexing to me. The film would have worked better as a straight-up, serious horror movie.
He has a point there.
This tries to be a comedy, and that's one of the big problems. It fails at balancing correctly humor and horror. In fact, for the horror part, I didn't find anything remotely frightening about it. It's more of an overly bizarre film trying too hard to be funny and weird, and more of a pastiche of a horror story, and not a good one.
Speak for yourself.
I will admit, there were a few moments here and there which made me giggle, but those don't represent the whole film, which is silly and dull more than anything else.
I beg your pardon?
And it doesn't help that it's filled with lead characters who I really couldn't care less about. Our archaeologist guy has got the charisma of an oyster, and the performances are mostly weak, especially coming from Sammy Davis and Peter Capaldi. I don't know what kind of accent they were aiming for, but one thing's for sure, it's horrible to listen to.
You mean those flints, Mr. Flint, the archaeologist?
Well, that layer of flints represents 1,000 years.
How do you know that?
There was a convent on this site. It had just been built when the Doomsday Book was written.
Hugh Grant is okay as Lord whoever, but the guy literally plays the same role in each film, so it's not like if his performance was surprisingly refreshing or anything like that.
Well, no, not in a manner of speaking, but...
They could have all gotten gobbled up by the white worm in question, and I wouldn't care less. Whenever one of the people is bitten or touches the venom, they go into nightmarish hallucinations, which were quite disturbing, full of flamboyant colors and creepy religious imagery, and that's one of the movie's good sides. Unfortunately, most of the runtime is not made up of that. I would have liked it if they had dug deeper into, for example, the origins of the snake cult, things like that.
Hey, you'll be saying it's the Loch Ness Monster next.
But no, just dull dialogue which put me to sleep. Overall, if you want a horror comedy pastiche that is both funny and scary, just watch Scream, because The Lair of the White Worm is disappointingly shallow and meaningless. What an awful movie.